our original interviews, we conducted 2 interviews together on November 20, 2012, in relation to another internal affairs case. Case number was 2012-11-312. We discussed an incident that happened in the shift commander's office on August 4th, 2012. Could you give me your version of what happened? Can you tell me what happened in the shift commander's office on August 4th?
In our interview?
I'm sorry, you asked the question.
Okay. Can you tell me again what you witnessed in the shift commander's office on August 4th?
What I saw was Officer Sella in the office. He had a pair of crutches. He was sitting in a chair. Captain Hunter was in the office. Those are the only 2 I can be certain that I remember being in there. I remember Sella was filling out paperwork. I did see Captain Hunter at one point attempt to give Officer Sella a wet willy, stick her finger in his ear. I did hear Captain Hunter say that Officer Sella tasted salty. I did see and hear her spit into the trash can. That's...
Did you see Captain Hunter lick Officer Charles Sella's head and or neck?
I did not physically see her lick him or her tongue touch his head or neck. No.
Okay. All right, if you could, you have these interviews in front of you. On the follow-up interview, page 2. I asked you the question, did you witness her licking him? Go ahead. And in your answer, you begin the statement that I don't remember. I think I did. I think he was sitting in the chair. I don't remember her licking his neck. And you stay right here. I remember her licking his head. You may point it out, James.
Right, the reason I stated that was earlier you had read me the basic part in the previous interview about, you wrote me the narrative, I guess, the complaint from Officer Sella, and you painted the picture for me that stated that, you know, she had licked him, had said that he had tasted salty and that she spit him in the trash can. I vividly remember her saying that he did indeed taste salty, and I remember her spitting into the trash can. At that point, I connected a dot in my own mind, because that was all that made sense with her standing behind him and her stating that he tasted salty and her spitting him in the trash can. That, like I said, in my head, the only thing that made sense was that she must have licked him. And at that point, and that my answer to that was that I was certain, and even in this report, that she said he tasted salty and that she spit into the trash can.
Mm-hmm.
But I never said I was 100% sure that I saw her lick him. I put on here that I'm pretty sure I do remember her licking him now, but I never said I was 100% sure that I saw that.
Sure, I think we're reading the same thing, but you say, I don't remember her licking his neck. I remember her licking
Down here.
like his head. So, do you consider that a truthful statement? I remember her licking his head.
Remember there's a few lines up at the very top of this page.
Sir, answer the question I just asked. I remember her licking his head. Is that a truthful answer?
I do not remember her physically licking his head, no.
So is that a truthful answer that you gave in your follow-up interview?
Mm. My answer is what it states in here right now, is that
This is a yes or no question. Is that a truthful statement? Yes or no?
I did not see the physical contact. No.
No, it is not a truthful statement? Or what are you saying? I'm trying to be clear here.
But I did not, I just have to reiterate, I did not physically see her tongue touch his body. No, I did not.
So your statement, I remember her licking like his head, is not a truthful statement? Yes or no?
I'm going to have to say then no, but it was based upon an assumption and me putting together the dots.
Okay, so the way I understand it, no, I remember her licking like his head is not a truthful statement, but you made assumptions to make that statement. Is that correct?
Yes, a reasonable assumption, yes.
All right, they,
I came to that assumption that, and that I believe that it's a reasonable assumption because it was the story that you had already provided me earlier in the week, where you sat and read to me that Officer Sella stated that she licked his neck, and then she spit into the trash can. She said that he was salty.
all right, you just said that, and you're correct, and when I read you that statement, that she licked his neck, but you specifically said she licked his head. Where did that come from?
You said head in there too.
All right, that quote is on pages 6 and 7 of the original interview.
The first question, right, page 6.
It begins the very last statement. I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to read you a little bit off Officer Sella's complaint here at the very bottom of page 6.
I'd like to be up the 5th line from the top of page 6.
Okay. So why did, and your statement in the second interview, you specified It seems like to me that you're specifying that she licked his head.
The first time you read me the initial statement, and you said that she licked his neck and head, I automatically assumed, or, I'm sorry, not assumed, but, I automatically took that as something very sexual. When you lick somebody's neck and head and all that. And I know I'm very adamant that I did not perceive anything that happened in that office that morning as something sexual, which is why I was when you first asked the question, I was adamant, and I said no, because I took it as something very sexual, right? So when I went, after that first interview concluded, and I went and I thought about it more, and took those the sexual overtones out of it, and just replayed the events, without the sexual overtone, things started to come back. Especially with like I said, her saying that he tasted salty, her that she spit into the trash can, and like I said, at that point I connected the dots that, which I find is very reasonable.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. On page 2 of the original interview, the first interview. I'm sorry, not page 2, page 6. Fifth question, fifth line down. I asked, okay, did you see Captain Hunter lick Officer Stella's neck and head? No, is your answer.
Which was the first time you asked.
Is that a truthful
And
answer?
that is a truthful answer, because that was when I automatically went to thinking of it as a sexual in nature. As far as the neck goes, because when the word that, when it wasn't did I see her lick Officer Stella's head, it was, did you see her lick Officer Stella's neck and head? And I focused on the neck part as being very sexual, and as I've already stated, once I heard that, like, everything in my head went to the whole encounter being sexual in nature, and I know that I did not perceive anything sexual that morning, which is why I was very adamant that no, I did not witness it. I did not witness anything sexual.
Okay. So just so we're clear, you assumed it was a sexual in nature?
The way you asked it, I assumed the question you asked it was sexual in nature.
Okay. Approximately 30 minutes. It was more like, it was exactly, based on my records, 33 minutes after our original interview ended. Mr. Cloud called me and stated that you wanted to speak to me again. About, it said you remember some things, you need to add some things to your statement.
Yes.
What prompted you to remember these things?
In the initial interview, I was never specifically asked about her making the the salty comment or spitting into the trash can. And as I was sitting in our chow hall thinking about the interview, I thought it was, I thought it necessary that I come in to make sure that that I told you that I did indeed remember that, but I was never specifically asked those questions.
Do you, do you consider the tasted salty comment that you're saying Captain Hunter made to be crude, offensive, sexually explicit, anything like that?
Do I?
Yes, sir.
Mm, no, the comment that he tasted salty. No.
Okay. After your initial interview, in the gap between the two interviews, did you speak with anybody?
No.
Did you speak to Sergeant West?
No.
Officer Sell? Colonel Sell?
No.
Did anybody make any attempt to contact you?
No.
Did you discuss this case with anybody between the two interviews?
No.
Do you carry a cell phone?
Personally,
Yes.
I do have a cell phone.
Did anybody try to send you a text message between the two interviews?
No.
Okay, back to page 6. First interview. Just so I'm clear. When I asked you, did you see Captain Hunter look off your cell as neck and neck? You said no. You believe that's a truthful statement?
Is it a truthful statement? Yes, it is a truthful statement.
Page 2 would follow up on you. Your statement, I remember her licking like his head, is that a truthful statement?
You've already asked me.
Right, and I'm asking again, is that a truthful statement? Yes or no? That's not the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for a yes or no. Is that a truthful statement? I remember licking like his head.
I've already stated.
Sir, understand this. I'm giving you the correct order to answer that question, yes or no.
No.
Okay. All right, in front of you, I gave you copies of Volusia County Division of Corrections policy. You can deal with report of policy 102.09C. Officer Schneider, do you believe you're in violation of policy, Volusia County Department of Corrections policy 102.09 subsection C?
No, because the totality of my statement is accurate.
All right, please refer to Maryland Rules and Regulations 86-453 subsection 12. Knowingly giving false statements to supervisors, other officials, or public. Do you believe you violated that Maryland rule, sir?
No, I do not.
All right, sir. Would you like to make a statement, or is there anything else you'd like to add in regards to your case?
No, thank you.
Time is now 11:18 hours. To be off the record, so interview is complete.
Captain Bannis, as part of your duty as an internal affairs investigation, do you determine, based on the evidence you gather in an investigation, whether the subject officer has violated any Volusia County merit rules and regulations or department directives?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you conclude an internal investigation, do you prepare a report of that investigation, which includes sort of summaries of the interviews you've taken, as well as your conclusions as to what violations, if any, have been sustained by the evidence you've gathered?
I did. I submit that to Mr. Moore.
Did you do that in this case?
I did.
Do you have a copy of your ROI there?
I do.
Okay. Could you please, the board has a copy of the notice of dismissal. Do you have a copy of that as well?
I do not.
May I approach? Could you please tell the board what directives and policies and procedures you determined were violated in this case by Officer Schneider, and we've heard the evidence, so generally just what evidence supported your determination?
Okay, I sustained violations of Volusia County Department of Corrections policy 102.09C. That policy reads, all staff shall make cause to be made accurate, complete, and truthful reports and official records. No staff member shall knowingly make or cause to be made a false report or falsify any official record. And subsection 2, no staff member shall make or cause to be made any inaccurate, misleading, contradictory, or improper report or official record. During Officer Schneider's first interview, he told me that he did not see a lick, and if a lick had happened, that would have stood out. And he possibly saw a wet willy. During the follow-up interview, the same day, he did see Captain Hunter lick Officer Silva's head. And he's pretty sure that he saw a wet willy and heard the tasted salty bones. In his third interview, the subject interview, when he was the subject of the investigation, he did not see a lick and definitely saw a wet willy at that point. All the contradicting statements within these sworn interviews caused me to sustain that violation, and then the same would go for Volusia County Merit Rule 86-453 subsection 12. knowingly give false statements to supervisors, other officials, or the public. I additionally sustained a violation of Mayor Rule 86-453 subsection 8, which states criminal, dishonest, or other conduct which interferes with effective job performance or has an adverse effect on the efficiency of county service. Because of his conflicting statements, he made, I couldn't use him as a witness in the Captain Hunter case, because he had made so many different statements in regarding the incident that was alleged to have happened there, that he had been identified, that he was a witness to. His testimony in that case wasn't useful.
And just to be clear, you were not saying that his actions necessarily were criminal, or were you? Because that has criminal, dishonest, or other conduct.
The possibility of being criminal was there also because of perjury. It was a sworn statement. He was providing sworn statements.
That's all I have at this time.
Your witness.
Captain Ennis, other than the internal affairs investigation of Captain Hunter and the two subsequent internal investigations, affairs that spawned off of that, how many prior internal affairs investigations have you conducted?
Prior to this, 3 or 4.
3 or 4 here in Volusia County?
Yes,
And you had conducted other, obviously in the course of your duties, important investigations.
criminal investigations,
Okay,
criminal or death investigations.
criminal or death investigations. During the first interview on November 20th, Officer Schneider tells you he has no idea why he's there.
Correct.
And considering that you're doing an internal affairs investigation, and you basically asked everybody not to speak to each other, that's a good sign, right? Because it means nobody's talking.
Correct.
Okay. So he has no idea why he's there, and he tells you that. The questions that you begin with, you stated previously, the reason on page 4, where you specifically state, remember, you're not the first person I've interviewed about this, and I do have other statements. I think you previously testified that the reason that you stated that is because up until that point, the answers that Officer Schneider was providing to you in some way contradicted what Sergeant West had stated to you.
Correct.
So prior to that statement, do you see any specific questions that you actually asked Officer Schneider for which he provided a specific answer that contradicted?
I'm not saying that he contradicted, but he wasn't recalling the incident that took place, which he was placed in the room already. So I had a good idea that he was in the room and witnessed the same thing Sergeant West had.
You had a good idea because somebody else said that he was in the room.
Correct.
Okay. So at that point, you don't have any information as to where in the room Officer Schneider was?
I don't recall that.
Do you have any information as to potentially what Officer Schneider's line of sight might have been in viewing these events?
No, ma'am.
On page 5, when you specifically ask, I'm sorry, it's about midway down the page, you specifically ask about the wet willow.
Okay.
And the response is, after a significant pause, she might have, I'm not 100% sure, but I do recall, ... Some thinking still going on, and then you ask another question. Is that how that reads?
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. So not a definitive answer is given for that question.
Correct.
On page 6, this is the first time that specifically the lick is brought up. Okay? And your exact wording is, did you see Captain Hunter lick Officer Sella's neck and head? Did you intentionally, not intentionally, but you agree that you didn't use the actual description, which is the back of the neck and the back of the head? Which you
I
later-
didn't specify that, no.
Okay, on the bottom of page 6 and going to 7 is when you actually start reading the exact complaint. And this is the first time that Officer Schneider is hearing what I'm gonna call the 3 pieces. We've got the salty comment, the spitting, and the lick. These 3 pieces of a narrative that you provide. In response to that, there's a pause, some thinking. I don't remember her licking him. I don't remember specifically that she flatulated. I mean, that you know, I've seen her do it before, not lick anybody, but yeah. Does that answer specifically address the salty comment or the spitting comment?
No.
Do you anywhere in this first interview specifically ask if Officer Schneider remembers either of those elements specifically?
I didn't specify the comment, but I asked if you remembered any comments, not the specific tasted salty.
And you asked that question prior to providing the narrative?
Did I? Okay.
On page 3, you asked, did you hear Officer Sella and Captain Hunter have any kind of conversation, any kind of interaction? So that's kind of a general
Right, but
question.
I didn't specifically ask about the tasted salty comment.
Right, no, that's,
That was confused on what you were asking.
oh, I'm sorry. So after you give the narrative, where you provide the information about the salty comment and the spitting, do you specifically ask again, or do you specifically ask ever, if he remembers those 2 events happening?
Not that I didn't do that.
At the end of the first interview, well, let me ask you this. At the end of the first interview, based upon your experience interviewing witnesses, what was your opinion of Officer Schneider as a witness?
I felt like he was holding something back.
Yeah. And where did you get that from?
Just as, I don't recall, I don't remember, he remembers being in the room, he remembers specifics of Officer Sella being injured, sergeant's doing paperwork, but he doesn't remember anything that would, in my mind, stand out. You know, a female high-ranking captain licking an officer on the head, passing gas on him, giving him blood willy, those things stand out. So that struck me as off.
Just-
But he
and-
remembered being in the room, and none of that.
Despite that his testimony also included that those events that stick out in your mind as often, my mind as well, happened on a pretty regular occurrence. That his actual responses are, I've seen her do that before, sounds like something she would do. So to recall specifically from 109 days prior,
But your client in this interview specifically said that if he had seen the lick, he would have remembered that.
so in this, right, so at the end of this first interview, he's saying if he had witnessed it, had seen it, he would have remembered it. And you found that, so at the end, I'm just trying to understand at the end of the first interview, what you believed his testimony at that point to be.
I felt like he was holding information back. I felt like he didn't want to be involved in the situation.
Okay. And so at the end of the first interview, when he asked specifically if he remembers something, should he get back in contact with you? And And your response is absolutely.
Correct.
Okay. Why is that?
Because if he has information to provide, I want to have it. That information pertinent to the investigation.
Right, because the point of all this is to get to the truth,
Correct.
right? And it's not necessarily that what you say the first time you just have to stick with.
No, not necessarily that, no.
So if later on, memories are refreshed, you think of something different, you think of something new, everyone, you agree that it's important to have that person come back and get that on the record. Okay. So 33 minutes later, you are notified that Mr. Schneider, in fact, would like to come back and speak to you again. At the time that you are made aware of that, is it your secretary who provided the statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you aware, and I'm sorry, I just can't read the signature, had she, at that time, before you started the second interview, were you aware of that woman, McLeod, thank you, Ms. McLeod, that she had actually observed Officer Schneider in the mess hall by himself, sitting there with his head down?
No, the title wasn't.
You were not aware, okay. But you subsequently became aware of that?
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the second interview, 33 minutes later, the bottom of page 1. Officer Schneider tells you he started to replay the morning in his head. He does start to remember some things. And so then I do remember her saying something about him tasting salty and spitting. So I'm pretty sure I do remember her licking him now. Would you consider that to be an affirmative declaration of his memory?
No.
A little farther down the page. Did you witness, your question, did you witness her licking him? His response, the entire response. That I don't remember, I think I did. I think he was sitting in the chair. I don't remember her licking his neck though. I remember licking like his head. Is that an affirmative declaration of his memory?
I remember her licking like his head. I take that as an affirmative.
So you selected 7 words out of that entire response, and that is what you take as the declaration of his memory.
That, to me, sounds like an affirmative statement.
All right, my question is, did you select 7 words out of 3 sentences?
Yes.
Okay. A little further down the page, and I'm pretty sure she did try to give him a wet willy at one point. I think it was before that. Again, is that an affirmative declaration of his memory?
That was an affirmative.
He then goes on to tell you that he didn't think it was sexual. And bottom of page 3, doesn't really remember Officer Sully getting too upset or yelling or anything like that. Again, I don't think it was a sexual thing. So out of the entirety of 5 pages of the transcribed interview, do you believe this to be a solid affirmation of what his memory is? The interview as a whole.
Solid as a whole? No. But I don't think any interview as a whole is a solid affirmation. I think some of the statements are affirmative.
So do you think that a particular statement extracted from an interview better represents an affirmative memory?
I think it depends on the situation.
Okay. based upon your experience in interviewing witnesses, the person is asked to recall specific events that were not particularly impactful to them, and a significant period of time had passed. Would you find it more odd if that person, right out of the gate, was able to deliver to you very specific answers?
I think it could go either way. It would be odd for very specific, and it's odd for no memory.
So you take this as he had no memory.
No, not at all. I'm saying he thinks he saw her lick his head. And that's what I took out of it, that he thought he saw her lick her head.
Okay,
That's what he said.
okay. We don't see anywhere in here, so we're clear, where Officer Schneider says, I saw this, I saw a lick.
I remember her licking like his head.
Right, that's his answer. Would you read the entire answer?
That I don't remember. I think I did. I think he was sitting in the chair. I don't remember her licking his neck though. I remember her licking like his head. And because he was specific about her not licking his neck, to me, that's telling me he did see her lick his head. Because he remembered not seeing the neck get licked, but the head did.
And again, in this second interview, we're very clearly, as the interviewer, it did not escape your notice that Officer Schneider was not affirmative in almost anything at this point.
Correct.
Okay. As the interviewer, the point is to try to get somebody to nail them down to something, right?
Correct.
Okay. So in doing that, we would ask questions, specific questions, to try to draw it out of them sometimes.
Okay.
So if Officer Schneider wasn't real clear on what he saw or what he remembered, would a starting point for you as an investigator be to get an idea of what he possibly could have seen?
Could be.
Okay. So in anywhere in these first two interviews, do you ask for, describe the layout of the room?
No.
You ask him, is he 5 feet away? Is he 50 feet away? We don't know if, at this point, you don't know as the interviewer, if Officer Schneider has his face in the corner.
Correct.
Okay. So we have no information at this point as to Officer Schneider's perspective of the events that he is being asked to describe.
Correct.
Are you familiar with Florida Administrative Code 11B-27.0011, concerning moral character? And that particular rule reads in part, if the violation involving perjury or false statement is alleged to have occurred in the performance of regularly required work duties or the course of an administrative or disciplinary investigation, a certified officer's failure to maintain good moral character as defined in subsection 4 of this rule section shall not include a statement in which the officer making the statement conceded such statement to be false prior to the employing agency's conclusion of the internal affairs investigation in which the false statement related to a material fact. Does that sound?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At the time that Officer Schneider returns for the second interview,
Okay.
would you consider the subsequent testimony that he gives at that point to be recanting the first testimony?
He wasn't the subject at this point. He was a witness in that incident. So, yeah, somewhat he was recanting.
Okay. Recanting, clarifying, adding to?
Clarifying. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At that point, investigation is still open?
Correct.
Okay. Other than that one sentence, other than those 7 words, is that the only time in all 3 interviews that Nathan Schneider states that he saw like licking the head?
Page 4. That's the follow-up? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
His statement toward the top, I think it's his second time he talks. When he's talking about it not being sexual in nature. It was just her trying to gross him out or whatever, but I do remember her licking him and then the wet willies. And so if I remember correctly, I mean, he didn't just sit there and like, ooh, that's cool, or nothing, but all, you know, he was just like, oh, that's gross, what are you doing, kind of thing. So that's, I take that as an affirmative statement.
In the 3rd
And
interview?
how about on page 3 at the very top, follow-up interview? Very top comment, I don't believe so. I think it was just kind of like, wow, I can't believe she just licked you. That sounds affirmative to me too.
In the 3rd interview, when Officer Schneider is telling you that he specifically did not see the physical contact, the tongue touch the head. At that point, have you inquired as to the layout of the room?
No,
Have you inquired as to his positioning and his perspective, line of sight in any way?
yes, I played him as an interview with Sergeant West. He said he was, or it was actually an interview with Captain Hunter.
All right. Specifically, had you inquired to?
No, with him, no.
And at the time of the 3rd interview, which is the first interview of Mr. Schneider's actual investigation concerning his inconsistent statements, had he been provided all of the previous statements, interviews or statements surrounding the event?
Surrounding the entire, what event are we talking about
Well,
here?
okay, so, yes, all right. Had he been provided any of the interviews which provided information concerning his contradictory statements?
Yes, ma'am, I have been provided transcripts of those interviews.
Not of his, but like you just stated, I believe one of the, had he been provided any of the statements
No.
from anybody else?
No.
Okay. Any of the statements concerning what other people said that he saw or said that he could have seen?
I believe I provided him the Officer Sell's statement, the written statement.
I don't believe that's true.
Let me just double check, I think I have. No, ma'am, I didn't.
That's all I have.
Just a couple brief follow-ups. With regards to whether or not you asked Officer Schneider where he was located in the room, I think you testified that you interviewed Sergeant West first, and he sort of gave you the layout of the room and where Sella was and where West was and where Schneider was, correct?
Correct.
And despite the fact that you didn't ask Mr. Schneider to tell you where he was, he never told you that his view was obstructed or he wasn't in a position to see what you were asking about, did he?
No, he acknowledged that he was in the room.
on your experience as an investigator interviewing witnesses and all different kinds of cases like you told us about, do you feel like you have an ability to tell when a witness is being evasive with you or not being complete or forthright?
I like to think so.
And is that what you felt at the end of Mr. Schneider's first interview, that he wasn't telling you everything?
Correct.
When you conduct an internal investigation, what is your goal? What are you trying to do?
Truth. Just find out the truth of what happened.
And when you're a sworn law enforcement officer, when you're dealing with law enforcement officers, correctional officers, do you expect them to be truthful and complete when being interviewed under oath?
Absolutely.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Tom, anything else from your side? Okay, any questions from the board, please?
I'm unclear on forced testimony.
Okay.
Did you say forced? I'm sorry.
Forced. Is that, as I recall, I think, in the first, yeah, forced interviews, I'm sorry, forced interviews. What does that mean?
As an employee of the county, I'm giving, say, Officer Schneider in this case, I'm giving him an order that to interview and answer questions about a specific event that is work related. If he refuses that order, he'd be subject to disciplinary action, like an insubordination charge.
So during your interview process, you're not only in internal affairs asking questions, you're still captain, is that?
Yes, sir.
You're still a captain. And at that time, you can, as a captain, demand that he answers.
Correct. And if he refuses, he'd be subject to